it like that.
Nice.
What's it like? I was actually there in attendance in Cleveland for Coe's first career NFL touchdown, which was awesome. And,
Awesome.
It was a great game. You could hear me on camera. I was just screaming, "Say it ain't so, Coe! Say it ain't so!" Sadly, from there, the game kind of went off the rails a little. That was the last high moment of that game, but it was a great game. Overtime loss, fun time.
Yeah.
But how was that moment for you? Seeing the first, whether it was on TV, in person, wherever you were, seeing his first NFL touchdown. How was that?
Well, dude, I mean, we were at home because it was a away game. We don't travel to a lot of the away games because we can get into that later. But, to watch that and to think I wished I was there live. So to have your video was so cool. And just that, hey, this is so cool. I mean, that was so cool for us. Catching it from Tom Brady, right? Like, he's got the ball yet. I mean, first NFL touchdown means a lot, right? I mean, as a dad, that's just so cool to see. And it was fun to watch. And, it didn't have the outcome we wanted, but still the same. What a memory! What a memory to have, right? So,
and honestly,
cool.
those. One of the best guests ever, the Buccateers in the house. You guys hear him on Tampa radio all the time. He's one of the best in the business. My favorite personal in the business. That's why I'm elated tonight. Growing up in the Chicago area, you're used to sports radio. That's what gets me through the day. So this man does help get me through the day, I will say, with the Pat and Aaron show at work. Nothing like it. So it's incredible. It looks like we got Stunna bumbling in. I'm Tampa Tones. We are joined by lead goon tonight, host of the Pat and Aaron show of WDAE, Pat Donovan. And it sounds like Stunna is bumbling a little bit. Going to put him on mute for a second until that gets a little cleared. But we're joined by Pat Donovan.
It looks like Stunna's hanging out with Cheech and Chong in a car with the windows up or something over there.
It does look like you got a little...
No, my camera's broke.
And he was trying to pull me in big time. And then I was like, nothing's happened with Indianapolis yet. Like, I really want to give Indy a chance. And then also I talked to Cody Gruden, once he took over Rich McCann, and still like, well, look, I was like, y'all just give me the opportunity to explore free agency, see what's going on, and then come out and make it do it.
All right, everyone, you are tuned into the Buccateers at wide receiver, Kalen Geiger, and we are about to have a great pod. This is the Buccateers. You're tapped in, and here we go. Howdy ho, howdy hey, how the hell is everybody? Welcome back into our monthly special. It's our new show, Katz Tampa Tones here. We'll be with you once a month on a Monday or Wednesday. We'll decide, but probably Mondays, maybe Wednesdays. We'll see. A dive into the 813 Tampa Sports History. We're going to be talking Bucs, Rays, Lightning through the year. We're going to be with you once a month through the entirety of the year, all 12 months of the year, depending on what season we're in. We're going to be bringing you guys that, along with a little bit of up-to-date news about the team. We got some Desmond Watson news and some other insight as well for this week with the Bucs. And we're also going to give our top 5 coaching rankings of all time, and then some honorable mentions for executive as well. So everybody's doing their top players list in Tampa Bay. No real coaches or executives list that I've seen out there. We got a cool chat already. J-Lo in the house. Richard in the house saying perfect timing as I'm leaving work. J-Lo saying Katz and Tones are going to crush it. Without further ado, I'm going to bring in the great Katz himself, Mr. Katz. How the heck we doing? 3-0, brother, and I'm excited to dive deep into some
3-0. 3-0, we're doing good, and perfect segue. We mentioned history. Starting on September 27th, that's Saturday, and this is not a plug. I don't get paid for this. At the Tampa Museum of Art, there's a Buccaneers 50th anniversary exhibit that runs through, I want to say, the final weekend of October. So I'll be making my way over there one of these weekends.
That's incredible stuff. As he said, he didn't make money for that. He's just giving it a shout out because the man enjoys it. So, Katz, and when does that run through again?
September, this Saturday, which is the 27th, through whatever the last weekend of October is, which I don't know the date, what weekend is the final weekend there, but for a month.
That's really good stuff. So go on over there. Maybe meet Katz yourself if you run into him over there. You never know. And he'll be more than nice, as he always is. Katz, quickly, Mayfield got added to the injury list. He does push through a lot, according to Greg Allman. Right biceps injury. He has been brutalized over the first handful of weeks. So, Richard, you are right. Baker Mayfield was added to the injury list, but good news, he did practice, although it was limited fashion. And Katz, this guy's a tough son of a gun. It's going to take a lot to pull Sir Baker Mayfield out of a football game.
Yeah, you won't see him out with biceps tightness or whatever they're calling it. These are the type of injuries that you don't hear about that hockey players have all the time. And the truth is, football players have them all the time. They just have to put out an injury report. Because once you play football, you're never healthy again. Not fully. Very rarely. That I do know from watching long enough.
Yeah, and the great Ian Beckles iterates what you say, Katz. He says, once you get hurt, you're never healthy again. And
Correct.
that holds true. And Baker Mayfield really is almost on the injury report at some capacity, at least half the season, I would say. So it's not like now I'd be alarmed if it was Friday or Saturday and you see the DNP pop up next to his name or something and he regresses through the week. Then it's like, okay, what happened? But let's be honest, let's be clear. Vita Vea week 1 didn't practice on Friday or Saturday. Ended up playing. Luke Gadecki, although got taken out of game, wasn't practicing until Monday night against Houston. He ended up playing. So unless I see something to worry me, I'm not going to be worried about Baker's injury too much. He's already hobbled at times every game this season, pretty much, Katz. I remember him. So last thoughts, Katz, on Baker being on this week's injury report before we move on to a new Buck and then some Bucs history.
Yeah, a non-concern, put succinctly.
I agree with that. And Olivia checks in. Hey, Olive, thanks for checking out our new show here on the Buccateers, a dive into the 813 Tampa Bay Sports History, hosted by A-Cats and Tampa Tones once a month. So J-Lo says, new Rays owner by Bo Stu. Yeah, Katz, you want to give your thoughts on new Rays ownership?
Sure. Well, the time had come for him to move on once the last stadium deal went kaput that he pulled out of. But I will say this. I was an intern with the Den Devil Rays in 2006. I don't know if he was the person that actually hired me. I don't think so. I didn't meet him then. I've met him a few times. I give him a lot of credit for what he did to this organization. They were a complete, total shit show under Namoli. They became a winning organization. No, they haven't won a World Series, but since under his ownership, he's put in the right people to run his organization that have made the Rays, if nothing else, a playoff contender, and also at the cutting edge of a lot of things that we've seen in Major League Baseball. Not to mention so many people from the Rays staff get hired and poached elsewhere. So he deserves a lot of credit for that. But at the end of the day, his inability to work with people outside of the organization when it came to the ultimate, elephant in the room, which was getting a new stadium that, he said we needed from the get-go, was his undoing. And it was time to cash out and move on.
I agree with that sentiment in entirety. A lot of people forget a lot of the good, but there was obviously some maybe not aggression, but hey, your hands are tied in baseball more so. It's not really an even playing field. But what is an even playing field is Katz and I here on a dive into the 813. If you're watching on YouTube right now, hit that like button, subscribe button, turn that notification bell on. You'll never miss an episode. Much like our guy Buckin here. He says, yo, Buckin's a regular. Richard is a regular. J-Lo is a regular. Just kidding. J-Lo's a co-host as well. And pay attention for his own show, Campus Kickoff. It's a quick glimpse at every college football weekend that comes out every Thursday or in the future on Tuesdays and Wednesdays when college football starts a little earlier. But we're here talking 50 years of Bucs ball And right before Katz and I get into our top 5 ranked Buccaneers coaches of all time, this is going to be a lot of fun. They're not going to be in order either. Well, maybe Katz as well. I might put mine in order, but it's tough to list these guys 1 through 5. It's really a lot of coin flips. And then we're going to do our executives kind of as honorary mentions because there's only a handful of executives that belong in that conversation. It's a big conversation to have. And speaking of big conversation to have, Katz, Desmond Watson back in Tampa. And as the show is a split show, it is a history show, but we also talk about things that happened today. It was announced today by head coach Todd Bowles that Desmond Watson, although he's made progress, he will not be active this week against the Eagles, which we expected yesterday when we did Two Me Up Tuesday. We're like, hey, he just signed. It'd be pretty damn hard to believe. So Katz, although he's deemed the tush push terminator, his possible NFL debut will not be trying to bar the tush push.
Yeah, I think, he's obviously met some of the goals that they set for him to be brought back to the practice squad, and that's terrific. Happy for him, not just for football purposes, but for his life and his own health. In the interim, you've got to utilize him in practice to simulate what you're going to see between Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter on Sunday. So he does serve a purpose in the immediacy, perhaps, with that. But it'll be at least a little while, if not longer, before we hope to eventually see him out there in a real game.
Absolutely. And, the Bucs are kind of stockpiling big boys right now on each side of the ball. I call it just sign a UDFA tight end. If you missed it, we dove deep into it on yesterday's program and Two Me Up Tuesday, talked all about him, but he is a big man. And then a couple of big defensive linemen, obviously Desmond Watson, Elijah Simmons, Big Jones from the Ravens are all over 340, 350 pounds, all very big statures. I thought Elijah Simmons played really good in his NFL debut in limited action for this defensive line on Sunday. So I'm excited to see him, Vita Vea, Greg Gaines try and combat the tush push and go from there. But for those wondering, the Bucs did bring in a tight end. And Katz, I guess his wife is a TikTok star. Never knew that. But he is none other than, he's from the Lions as well, but his wife is a TikTok star. I never knew that. It is, I'm going to get his name here, but before I do
Caden, I don't remember the last name.
Perkson. I'm just looking up his name so I don't butcher it. I know it's Caden Perkston or Perkston, something along those lines. But Katz, have you heard anything about this kid? I just know he's about 6'7", 250 pounds, and his wife's a TikTok star, and he's played, I think, 6-7 years of college football. That's quite a lot.
That's all I've heard about him. Is I know he's 6'7" and change. I don't know anything else about him, honestly. But if at some point he gets elevated to the active roster, or was he signed to the practice squad or to the active roster?
Practice squad, and it's Caden Prescorn. I'm not quite, I got to look into how you pronounce it a little bit better, but Caden Prescorn, and his wife is a TikTok star, so that's off to a good start.
Well, hopefully he can make a name for himself here in Tampa Bay. And, if he, at any point, usually I presume a guy like that will be practice squad fodder, but you never know. So best of luck to him. Welcome aboard.
Our fellow co-host Zach Johnson's tuned in on Facebook right now. The great real estate agent in the Tampa area, David Ferrara, is live on Facebook right now as well. So we love to see our Facebook participants. J-Lo says, good to see Godwin full participation. Yes. It sure is. And Katz, that's going to be interesting. Evans might be out, and then maybe Godwin is in, as King Cook is joining us as well. Buckin saying top coach is hard to rank. You'll find ours out shortly. Our top ranked coaches shortly.
I'm glad to have, Chris practicing in full. I know Tristan was limited, but it sounds like they're still on the same path. Last week, Adam Schefter seems like somebody in that building talks to him. Quite optimistic that barring setbacks, both would play. That's how I'm looking at this as well. I think there's a very good chance we see them both. And that will be welcome. It's unfortunate that two guys come back, two others guys get injured at the same time. That's how it's going right now for this team. But, things have a way of sometimes evening out. You get hurt a lot early, but then maybe later you're the healthiest team, because usually it's the healthiest team standing that ends up holding up that trophy.
Wendy Heffercorn, or whatever her name is, that's how I'm going to pronounce it, Richard, from the Sandlot. Remember the lifeguard, whatever her name was. I'm going to call her tight end that. But we'll see if we learn him. Hopefully not, Katz. Nothing to be mean, but hopefully Culp, Durham, and Otten do such a good job and stay healthy that we.
That's exactly right.
Our guy Matt Kratz saying number one Bucs coach, in my opinion, John Gruden. Chucky, the guy is the most underrated head coach in the game. And I dream of the day I see this pro back on the sideline for any organization. Katz, I'm calling it. Next year, he will be a college football head coach. What say you?
I don't think it'll be as soon as next year, but I do think down the line he will be back. And Matt makes a good point here. I think over time, Gruden went from, at the time, people said, oh, well, and these are people from the peanut gallery. Well, all he did was win a Super Bowl with Tony Dungy's team, and then he did nothing after, blah, blah, blah. And he became underrated almost, because so many people just kept parroting that nonsense. We know what really happened. We had Brad Johnson on this show just talking how important John Gruden was to this organization and winning that Super Bowl. And he did make it back to the playoffs 2 other times later. So, yeah, he actually did become underrated and underappreciated, in my opinion, by a large portion of Buc fans. Maybe it was just a small minority. I'm not sure. Funny enough, his being canceled, as it turned out, being removed from the Ring of Honor, but now being put back in, becoming such a big personality for Barstool, being a guest on Tampa Sports Radio, being at Ray J, being at the Coaches Summit, Buc fans now have come to appreciate him more, and maybe Buc fans that didn't appreciate him to begin with appreciate him now.
A great amount appreciate him now, and I'll say that. And remember, at one point in time, Katz, he was, not to put it too heavily, not to toot his horn too much, but he was almost a larger-than-life football figure in those Corona commercials. They have his real-life statue at one of the bars I go to. He was announcing Monday Night Football. His fall from grace is just one of those things, but now he's back with Barstool, back in the Bucs Ring of Honor. They should have never pulled him out, and I'm not going to get into the rights or wrongs of it, but a lot of people in a lot of the Ring of Honor, yes, it's for off-the-field things potentially if you're that good of a Samaritan, but it's mainly to honor your on-the-play duties, so or on-the-field duties, I should say. So, yeah, really happy to see. It's kind of funny he has his own row right now, but he'll soon be joined by a guy he coached, Simeon Rice, and that'll be great, and that'll be Cardinals week. Katz, briefly, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but before we get to our coach rankings, after Simeon, who is your next guy, coach, assistant, whoever, to go into the Bucs Ring of Honor, is Brandon Spikes, our guy, saying, let's go Buccaneers. Yep, let's go, Brandon. Thanks for joining us. And Richard saying, I remember Wendy, Squints lady, of course. Yeah, the great Squints.
Yeah. Well, I thought for a while that James Wilder, and he was before my time, deserved to be in there. He's still not, which starts to make me think he never will get in. However, that said, I think he should be the next one in.
I like that. I like that. My thing is Tom Brady. If they're going to put him in, will it be sooner or later? And I think it could be sooner because we did see Bruce get put in pretty quickly. And Tom Brady will be a moneymaker the game he goes to, right, wrong, or indifferent. Now, again, right now he is the Raiders' partial owner. He's an announcer on Fox. So you really wonder if the Bucs want to wait till one of those things potentially cool down to honor the guy. But I'd love to see him honored. I'd also love to see a guy like, a couple others get in. I know they want to be my next choice, but eventually I'd like to see Wark Dunn get in. I would like to see Gerald McCoy get in, as you mentioned, James Wilder.
Hardy Nickerson. Derek Brooks wants him to be in, from what I heard. And if Derek Brooks wants him in, then he should be in. Period. End of story.
Derek Brooks, it was cool, Katz. He led the tunnel. He led the guys out of the tunnel on Sunday, and he was walking back in, and I yelled, Derek, we love you. And he looked at me. I pointed at him, and he's the man. He's really cool.
Great person. I got to meet him, 25 so years ago. Great guy then. Met him a couple times. Yeah, fantastic human and player.
J-Lo gives Gruden's, Arians, and Dungy top Bucs coaches to start. They could be on our list. They could not be. Find out here shortly. Special team scares me. Yeah, it's kind of crazy because we got rid of Keith Armstrong. I still think it was a forced buyout retirement. I don't really think it's truthful to say, oh, he just retired out of nowhere. But we'll see. But regardless, Thomas McGoffkey come in from the Giants and hasn't really done much. I mean, we're letting block kicks, letting block punts, although that block kick should have been a flag. You can't.
Yeah, the infamous leaping was actually leaping, and that was, well, we're not going to go down the road on what game I'm referring to. You probably know, but that was, by the definition, he did land on Elijah Klein's foot, so that should have been leaping, and that would have ended the game. But they missed it. Bucs went on to win anyway. Showed a lot of resiliency.
They sure did. And just one of those things that it was great to see all the legends and folks of past and present yesteryear get
They brought out a lot of people from my understanding. There were some people that were not so legendary that were within this organization. I'm not going to mention it on air that I understand were present, which is interesting. It goes to show that a class organization won't hold maybe some unsavory past against certain people that are still alumnus of this organization.
Yeah, Katz, they honored 141 individuals at half, and at least one from 1976 through 2025 or 2024, I should say. So
remarkable.
Cool. And Batman was there. That was pretty damn cool to
Fantastic
see.
Player. Yep, before my time, but he was phenomenal. I'm sure some will want him in Ring of Honor too. Batman would. Yeah, great.
I would love that as well if Batman was in too.
Great to have JPP. Deserved to be there. I wish I could find a list of all who was there, but I can probably guess a decent amount.
Now, to your point, a guy like Jonathan Franklin was there, and I love the big guy, but he was a less notable one. Not saying anything was wrong with him, but he was only on the Bucs for one season. Guys like that. So it was
anybody's more than almost anybody that didn't get into any sort of criminal history, I believe, serious criminal history, is welcome. And there probably are some guys that might have been there that, and I'm not judging anybody, that might have had some issues. There's one guy in particular there that I'm not going to name because there's too many stories about him. But I know he was there after we all thought he's fallen off the face of the earth. But I'm going to save it for maybe another show.
I think I know who you're referring to if I had a guess. But
yeah. It's good to see that he's alive and maybe fairly well. Say that for now.
Yeah, let me just say, was he kind of on like the 05 era?
No, you gotta come a little bit closer. You got a few years behind that.
All right, well, we'll talk off air, but maybe there were a couple guys there then.
Probably so, yeah. We've had some interesting characters throughout the years, good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah, and that's why I love this Bucs team, because we always stick through our folk for thick and through thin. And Pops texted it. Now it's obvious, but we'll save that for off air.
Yeah.
We'll see.
He's a conversation in and of itself, this particular player in person. So yeah, it's a whole show you could take up talking about his.
And I'll tell you who I was thinking of off air as well, and it makes sense for other reasons too. But what can you do? King Cook says I always loved Gruden. He got a raw deal. Yeah, definitely did. It's like, if they're raiding someone's house and they're trying to arrest somebody else, and somebody who's like 20 years old has like one bottle of beer in the fridge, and it's like, well, it's technically illegal, so you got to get in a little bit of trouble. But it's like, come on, sir, you weren't looking for me. I have one bottle of beer. Well, you're 20 years old, so you shouldn't have alcohol. Gruden kind of was one of those, not saying what he did was right or what he said was right by any means, but he fell victim to something that was out of his control. And his brother, well, that's a whole nother story. But
yeah.
Buckin thinks it's Brady next. Richard says in an organization allowed to induct Ring of Honor players Isn't I don't think so, Rich.
There's no rule on that, but I don't think they're going to do it because there's still, despite 2 periods of time in this organization that went over a decade that were so dark, there still are a lot of deserving players to go into that Ring of Honor that are not yet in. So I think more or less you don't always go in order, but I think these two great men deserve their time once they've hung up their cleats.
And I always say the same, Cats. I think they like to pay respect to the legends, and let those guys get in first. And that's a big thing in this football brotherhood. Sure, there's some guys that get into things quicker than others, but while you're playing, and you never know, no offense, but it's like, who's to say it's still in your playing days? Next thing you know, you get caught with steroids or gambling on games, and there goes.
And I've got a segue coming up, Tones, regarding the Ring of Honor to our topic. You can let me know when, because I've got a great segue.
There we go. Right after this, we'll get to it. As J-Lo says, Hardy Nickerson, another Ring of Honor guy that's deserving. Katz did bring him up, and I do agree with that. Hardy Nickerson was honored, which was great. Cam Brate not being introduced is disappointing. Yeah, again, though, I agree, J-Lo, but 141 guys, then where does the line stop, But Cam Brate should have been there. Definitely.
He works for the organization. He does radio shows. He's within the organization on Buccaneer Radio Network. So is Will Goldston now as well.
And that's another one we've alluded to. I think he should be an ROH guy. Do you think he has any chance, Katz? Just given his longevity and solidarity for one franchise.
I can't do it. I love the guy, but I just don't think he was a good enough player. He deserves a ton of credit, probably more love than Buck fans give him, because do you remember how the Bucs actually acquired Will Goldston, other than him being picked in the 4th round?
Well, I do remember that his 4-year deal at first that they gave him after his rookie contract took some by storm, and he kind of changed the player he was. I don't necessarily remember how they acquired that pick exactly.
They acquired that 4th round pick from the Patriots in return for one of my least favorite Bucs named Aqib Talib. So there was a lot of second guessing and motherfucking of the Bucs trading him, even though he did nothing but cause trouble while he was a good player. He never became great. He admitted he didn't watch tape until he left. With that 4th round pick, the Buccaneers selected William Goldston. So I'd say, did he have the career that Aqib Talib did in terms of being a huge impact player? Okay, no. But did he have an absolutely phenomenal, in his own way, career? And, for longevity and being a steady, great locker room guy, he did all that. So they ended up turning a bad thing into a positive, the way I look at it.
They certainly did, and Goldston is 4th in games played for the Bucs. Yes, I mean, think about it. Him, Levante David, Mike Evans had that special little run from 2012, 2013, 2014. Those guys got drafted 3 consecutive seasons. All have played every single snap that they've played in an NFL uniform with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's why I think what would have been the perfect honor for Will, I would... I'm not all against him being in the ROH. I do get where Katz is coming from as well, as that could open a can of worms for things. I think they would have honored Will perfectly if his mural was in front of the stadium last year when they did the crew since blank thing. And then, not that that's Ring of Honor worthy, but you could have always looked back and said, wow, I was on the stadium one day. And that would have fit the theme of longevity, because that's, to me, what they were aiming for. They had Evans and David and Godwin and Baker. I get Baker as a QB, but given the time period, crew since blank, I would have enjoyed to see Goldston there. But what can you do? They honor BA right after he retired. They certainly did, but Katz, go on.
No, it was interesting. I think his retirement, it took people by surprise, and by surprise at the time, I didn't see it coming. And, he meant so much to the organization, so much. So, it's understandable to put him in right away.
And I think it was one of those things where, hey, as Richard has a guess, we won't reveal names, but hey, that's a guess for sure. But Katz, as we know, Bruce Arians, very classy guy, probably a thank you from the Bucs as well for handling, whether it was on his own terms or not. I still say he's a classy guy. He is. It was his choice to give the reins to Todd Bowles. He wanted his friend to get another coaching job, and rightfully so. Bowles has done a great job, so I'm leaning with that aspect. But no matter the foot that Arians left off, he did it classy. And Katz, I think we're at our transition to the top 5 list. If you want to take it away, friend.
Sure, and my segue is not as good, but I'm still going to work this in anyway. We're talking about the Ring of Honor. We're talking about the first coach that went into the Ring of Honor.
Real quick, work done, yes or no, for the Ring of Honor?
For Ring of Honor, yes. Work done, yes. There might be some annoyance that he went to the Falcons, but he's in the Falcons Ring of Honor. He should be in the Bucs Ring of Honor. Absolutely.
Well,
yes.
There we go. Ring of Honor talk. So better segue now.
Yeah. The first coach that was inducted into the Bucs Ring of Honor was also the Buccaneers' first head coach, and he was a head coach before I was born, and that's John McKay. 0-26, but he never missed an opportunity to make a joke or have a one-liner. Was the team's execution? He was in favor of it. If a contest had 98 prizes, the 99th would be a trip to Green Bay. I agree. I don't care to really go to Green Bay. Maybe I'll make it someday because of the history. But, you're coaching in Tampa. You're the coach at UCLA, if I remember right. You don't feel like going to that cold. So many lines, and yet, the first 2 years, he kept it, obviously, and again, before my time, but I've watched the documentaries, kept everything as good as you could possibly do, as lighthearted as possible under the circumstances. And expansion drafts then we didn't get what Carolina and Jacksonville got. We got the cream of everybody else's leftovers, basically, aside from picking Leroy Selman number 1. Steve Spurrier, who I know was there Sunday, was our first ever quarterback. But he stood the course. That was all he could do. And eventually, by year 4, all of a sudden, the Bucs were 5-0. From 0-26, they made some strides. They won their first ever game against the Saints, which I always find just, now that we're their division rival and we all hate them, it's like chef's kiss on that. In fact, I purchased the program from that game. I don't know where it is. But yeah, basically, most importantly, 1979, the Bucs, they start off 5-0. They end up on the cover of Sports Illustrated. They're unbeaten, untied, and unbelievable. And as I remember, things got a little dicey that year. At the end, they were a 9-6 team. It didn't look like, it looked, they might, and they won a game, one of my favorite games to watch highlights of. 3-0, they beat the Chiefs in one of the most, I've never seen a live game with that kind of torrential rain in my life. And they go on to beat the Philadelphia Eagles in the playoffs, something that we've done 4 times now. So we've done that 4 times. We're 4-2 against them in the playoffs. That was our first, a 24-17 win. Ultimately, the Bucs would fall short of a Super Bowl appearance, losing to a team we're too used to losing to in the playoffs, the Rams. Some of these things kind of come full circle. But it was an incredible story. Ultimately, the Bucs would make it 2 more times to the playoffs, 1981 and 82. Before eventually his time came to an end here and left us in a period of 15 years with no playoff bursts. But, obviously he let the Jets score to help James Wilder get a record. The Jets thought he was a joke and all that. But you got to love him. He was before my time, but you know enough about him. If you're a Bucs fan, you almost, gotta, know that history. And if you don't, I hope you're learning something from me. And there's someone once sent me a list of every single one-liner he had. And I don't know where I put it, but it is just something great. If someone out there can find it, I'd be grateful. So he's my first, going in order. He's the first coach on my list.
I love it. And Buckin says he's the most fashionable Bucs coach of all time. And Katz,
absolutely.
That ties into the giveaway. I have it behind me somewhere. It's hard to see.
I do too. From his Ring of Honor game in 2010, they gave that same hat out.
So that's a great hat, man. It was very fashionable in the stadium. That's a great keepsake for you. Great keepsake for me. John McKay is definitely a good choice. And as you said, some battle-tested years, but he stuck through it. And yeah, he was at Oregon. He was at USC. He's in Tampa. Who the hell is time to go to a cold weather
Bay? What's in Green Bay? I know the history of Lambeau, and I respect it, and maybe someday I'll make it. But you could certainly understand his point of view as well of Green Bay. He even
Bucking
hurt it.
he says the hat and sweater is iconic, and so is the forward
It's-
hat you'd wear too. You know, the old school trucker looking cap he'd have on with
Oh, yeah.
Bucko the Bruce. I'm gonna go with is my number 5. Cats are in an order. Mine's gonna be in order, and again, no
Mine are in order chronologically. You're doing yours in order of. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, so Katz is doing chronological order. I'm doing mine in terms of who I view right now as, 5 to 1, 1 being the greater, 5 being still great, but not as great as number 1. Yeah, Rich McKay. And we're going to talk about executives in a little bit as well here, and we're going to tie those guys in too. So kind of a fun one, coaches, executives. But let's remember, it's just coaches. It's not head coaches, but usually it is the head coach, right? Because you're the mastermind behind things. You're the boss of the assistant coaches or the coordinators. So it could be coordinators, head coaches as well. And that's why I'm going with current head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at number 5, Mr. A-Cats. I'm going with none other than Coach Todd Bowles. And let me do some explaining before people go, oh my gosh, it's a little premature. Well, he already holds the record for most Buccaneers division title wins as a head coach, as he's made the playoffs every year as a head coach, and they've all been division titles. He holds that record for 3 consecutive seasons. He's made the playoffs, winning division titles. So Todd Bowles holds that record, as well as being the defensive coordinator for this team when we won the Super Bowl. Because remember, this is a coach's list. He's earned his stripes before being a head coach. He was an elite defensive coordinator, really buckled down, was a big part of that Super Bowl win. We were all over Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl on this Kansas City Chiefs team that looked like they wanted nothing to do with this Buccaneers team. And now here he is. Katz has his team at 3-0, has this team fighting, very banged up, and it seems like guys want to play for Todd Bowles as well. You see these guys, they're geared up, ready to roll, ready to run through a wall with them. So Katz, I'm putting current Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach Todd Bowles as my number 5. And who would you
He's deserving. So my next one, we're going to go I'm going chronologically. The 80s were after John McKay, and the early 90s were forgettable. Now, when I became a football fan and a Bucs fan, the coach was Sam Weish. Wiki Wacky Weish, may he rest in peace. But his successor was Tony Dungy. He was the first head coach hired by the Glazers. He was not their first choice. They wanted Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson didn't take the job because he preferred Dan Marino to Trent Dilfer to be his quarterback. Understandable. They wanted Steve Spurrier, big name. He was the first ever Bucs quarterback. He had history. He had success with the Gators. He said no thanks. So they turned to Tony Dungy, who had been passed over, and undeservedly, many years. He was deserving of a head coaching position before he got the one here. Thankfully for us, he didn't have one yet. And I mentioned Wiki Wacky Weish because, and I'm nothing against Sam, good guy. But Tony Dungy brought a certain calmness that this organization hadn't had all throughout the years, with the names, guys like Weish and Ray Perkins and Richard Williamson.
Throw Ray in the Bay, remember that?
Throw Ray in the Bay. People said he was Greg Schiano before Greg Schiano. Tony Dungy brought a calmness with him, and it was phenomenal. And what the most indicative thing of that is the way they started his first season. It was not good. It looked like the same old Bucs. And I didn't know for sure, was he really going to be I knew he was respected. I knew him from Minnesota. He had great defenses. They started 0-5. They started 1-8. But, his demeanor never changed. That was what was so important. He immediately told these guys, look, I want you guys to be great men in the community and go out and do work in the community. These were things that previous Buck coaches and also under maybe even previous, they didn't care. I mean, I'm not saying that they were bad guys by any means, but no coach that I'm aware of encouraged the guys to do that. And it started to foster a culture that you could say, all right, we've got a template now for success. We're not a great team. We're not doing well on the field. The results aren't necessarily there, but we're going to stay the course. We're not going to deviate. We're not going to panic. A calmness that this team needed. Trent Dilfer really needed it. Warren Sapp needed it. These guys all needed that. And before you knew it, that 1-8 became a 6-10 finish. Derek Brooks and Warren Sapp there was an extra motivation when, for the millionth time, Chris Berman called them the Yucks, and they went out and beat the Chargers, and in that game, and they won 3 in a row. And sure, before you knew it, they finished that year 6-10 after 1-8. The defense came rounded into shape. Brooks and Sapp and Lynch and Donnie Abraham all played big roles. They beat the Bears in the final game of that season. They blew them out. Bears had always been a thorn in our side. The Bucs' record against the Bears is still probably heavily in the black. And then the 1997 season is one of my top seasons in Buccaneer history. They were 5-0 again. They were on the cover of Sports Illustrated. They've got new colors. Their culture was fully, and at that week 1, it was fully on display where Dungy's defense really came into play. They beat the 49ers 13-6. Steve Young and Jerry Rice were knocked out of the game. Warren Sapp really made his entrance. Welcome to the NFL moment. His true one. And ultimately, it was Tony Dungy was the head coach when the Bucs broke their 18-year drought between playoff wins. 18 years they went between playoff wins, 15 years between playoff appearances, with one of the most memorable games. And again, his defense shown 20-10. The Bucs beat the Lions. They couldn't stop Barry Sanders. That was, Bucs have had many times in the history. It's like, they can't do this, they can't do that. Well, they couldn't stop Barry Sanders. He owned him. Even that season with the great defense, he ran for 220 yards in him. He ran for 65 that day and was a non-factor. And the Bucs went on to finally win a playoff game. The transformation was complete. For the most part, from being a laughingstock to a playoff team, that transformation was complete at that point.
Yeah, I remember Warren Sapp getting drafted, looking around, all pissed off. Oh, the Yucks, he said.
The Yucks. I don't want to go to the Yucks. He was from Florida, too. He's from Apopka. Played at Miami. He didn't want to go to the Yucks.
Yeah, Katz, and look at this real quick. I'm so mad as NWO Thompson. Thanks for joining. I'm from Cleveland, and the hatred I have for the Browns for letting Baker go. And Katz, we have friend of the show, Mike Martinez, or Baker Mayfield specialist, on a couple times a year. And he used to be a Browns guy, but he jumped off the bandwagon. So interesting that he's not alone. There's some other Browns fans doing the same.
And very relatable, because the Bucs, remember, they had a guy by the name of Doug Williams. They had a guy by the name of Steve Young. They had a guy by the name of Vinny, who was rightfully moved because, he threw 35 interceptions in a season. But, so the Bucs have a history of seeing quarterbacks go elsewhere. It's nice for the shit. I'm sorry that you're mad about that, Mr. Thompson. But, the shoe is on the other foot. Sorry that the Browns are on the wrong side of it. But, it's good to be on the right side of one of these QBs that got away from someone else.
I couldn't agree more, and it's rare for the Bucs to do that, but that was the first. We knew what we were getting in Brady, but Baker was a true treat. Speaking of true treat, Katz is John McKay and Tony Dungy is his first 2 coaches in his top 5 chronological order. I got Todd Bowles as my number 5 in my 5-1 top to bottom order of best of all time, in my opinion. And ironically enough, although Katz's is chronological and mine's 5-1 ranking, I'm going with Tony Dungy as my number 4 as well. I think he's the 3rd best head coach in Buccaneers history, 4th best coach in Buccaneers history. And he did a lot of great things, Katz. Didn't do a lot wrong besides just not winning the Super Bowl here. I mean, his drafting was amazing. I know it's a never-ending battle of whom you credit, right? The front office more so, or the coaching staff. But nonetheless, we'll just call it a draw. But Tony Dungy had a great eye for the draft, and he got the most out of his players. I think he made, and not a knock against Gruden or wherever they ended up, I think you've seen some players who played under Dungy who ended up falling off a cliff in terms of production right after Dungy left, or if they went elsewhere when Dungy left and the players went elsewhere, they didn't really equate to the amount of success that they had under Coach Dungy. And he obviously, I know it wasn't in Tampa, and this is a Tampa list. He did go on to win a Super Bowl, but that's why I have him at 4 here, Katz. He was never able to deliver the big one here, and that's nothing against him. Maybe if the Bucs kept him around, who's to say he could never? Who's to say maybe he wouldn't have that next year? But in terms of Bucs tenure, that's why I have him 4. I don't mean it. It's not a knock. It's still great. I mean, top is the all-time coaching list, including assistants. So you're still 4 in a 50-year span of all these coaches. That's still pretty damn impressive. And I want to give
I'm going to add some, if I can add something to that,
Yep.
Tones. I'm going to add that, Dungy, like I mentioned, he had a certain calmness, a way he did things, and a standard he set too. And he always kind of, he by keeping an even keel was so big for this team. But also by staying that way, in the end, that also became his undoing because he did not want to fire Mike Shula after the 11-6 loss to the Rams. He had to go, even if it wasn't all his fault. They had to beg him to fire him. Tony Dungy, I don't know if people knew this, almost resigned because they forced him to fire Mike Shula. And unfortunately, his undoing then also was the next two offensive coordinators were no better. And, usually you get 3 OC hires, they're all flops. And you don't have a quarterback, you're probably going to end up getting a pink slip eventually. Some of that's bad luck too, though, because it's not like there's always great offensive coordinators sitting around to be hired.
No, unless your name's Todd Bowles, and then, of course, they come out of nowhere, I guess. But one other thing quick on Dungy, I was upset he wasn't there Sunday, but he does have obligations with Sunday Night Football, NBC, so that was probably why they're in. Football aside, he was just a hell of a guy in this Tampa Bay community. It was really respectful.
He still is.
Yep.
He still does a lot of work here. Even when he became a Colts coach, he always has, and we're grateful for that.
And Katz, that's why I have him on this list as well, whether it's on the field production or off the field production. Just a great guy in this community, and he's really done a lot for Bucs ball, and he'll always be cemented into our legacy, Ring of Honor, all that good stuff. And I think his Hall of Fame plaque has both Bucs and Colts on it, if I remember correctly. But
I'll add this, he actually has said that his favorite season as a head coach was 1997 when the Bucs ended the playoff drought, more so than his Super Bowl season. I always appreciated that because it's a nod to the Bucs. So I always appreciated him saying that as well.
And Katz, it's crazy. He's in our Ring of Honor and the Colts Ring of Honor, deservingly so. But he's he's 69 right now, which he could easily be coaching in this football league if you look around and see the Pete Carrolls and of late the Bruce Arians of the world. You could easily throw him up there. Bill Belichick's still around, but he had so much front-loaded success that it seemed like he's a lot older than that, right? Not based on looks or anything, but just by how long he's been around. So there you have it. Tony Dungy at 4 chronologically for Katz. Tony Dungy at 4 rankings-wise. For me, Katz, number 3. Where are you heading there, my friend?
Well, got to go with an assistant who overlapped 2 head coaches, and may he rest in peace, Monty Kiffin. It's just impossible for me to leave him off. The fact that he was here for Dungy's entire tenure and Gruden's entire tenure. How many times you can count on, I think 1 finger, 2 fingers maybe, how many times they were not a top 10 defense under Monty Kiffin. He was the defensive coordinator of a historic defense in 2002, won a Super Bowl, of course. The 1999 defense was absolutely fantastic and almost single-handedly got the Bucs to a Super Bowl. One of my favorite Monty Kiffin stories, even though this was a play that went against the Bucs, was told. Derek Brooks told the story at his Celebration of Life, which was last summer, actually. And when the Bucs had a 6-5 lead, yes, that was the score, in the 1999 NFC Championship game, and the Rams, Sean King unfortunately had thrown a pick that set the Rams up in good field position. They had the ball at the 30 with a 3rd and 4. He calls for a 0 blitz. The Rams see it. They call timeout. And Sapp said, "Why are you doing this? You can't. You guys know. So no, we're going to do this. We're going to run this blitz. We're going to knock them on a field goal range, and we're going to win this game 6-5." Because it seemed at that point like that was our only chance of winning was by that score, because they'd hung on that 6-5 lead for tenuously for a while. Unfortunately, the Rams did a good job picking that blitz up, and Ricky Proehl, he made a great catch. Brian Kelly had perfect coverage. He made a great catch. It was a great throw by a Hall of Fame. I believe Kurt Warner's in the Hall of Fame quarterback, and a great throw. But it just went to show, Monty was not a guy that blitzed a lot, but he would pick the right moments. And even though that one didn't work, it worked wonders in the 2002 NFC Championship game. And this actually would be my favorite story, is I learned this from Rondé Barber when he was during COVID, he was on with Scott Smith of Buccaneers.com, just talking about that Super Bowl season. And I didn't realize this, but he said Monty Kiffin would blitz after the defense gave up a big play. And in that game, the Eagles in the third quarter trailing 20-10, McNabb hits Chad Lewis for about a 20-yard gain over the middle. It's still in minus territory. On the very next play, Monty Kiffin brings Rondé Barber on a corner blitz. He knocks the ball out of Donovan McNabb's hands. Ellis Wims recovers the ball. The Eagles' drive is thwarted. So you have that. Now put that in your back pocket. Remember, later in that game, it's still 20-10. Donovan McNabb, to his credit, makes an incredible play. He scrambles to his right. Nobody's open. He scrambles all the way back to his left. Throwing off his back foot, he completes a pass for about 25 yards to Antonio Freeman inside the 10. So you've given up the big play. And by now, the Eagles and Bucs know each other very well. They've coached against each other. They've played each other multiple times. Donovan McNabb at this point has picked up on the tendency that after a big play, Monty's going to blitz. So Rondé, of course, makes it look like there's no doubt he's coming off that edge. So McNabb reads it hot, and what happens? They don't blitz. And Rondé's right there, gets the interception, takes it the rest of the way, and that's it. And Bucs shut the bet down, go to the Super Bowl. And it just was amazing to me hearing that story because I honestly, in all those years watching, never picked up on it that Monty would blitz after giving up a big play. I didn't realize that. And the fact that he then deviated from that, it just, it really illustrates, the chess match of a defensive coordinator facing off against a good quarterback like McNabb, against a play caller like Andy Reid, who's always has been a great play caller, and saying, you know what, all right, now's the time, Rondé, what basically is almost like a kind of wink, wink, no, you know what to do now. Show the blitz and back out of it, and you're going to have an easy. And Rondé said that was one of the easiest interceptions he ever had. So that, to me, both those plays, one worked, one didn't, encapsulates. Is that a word? Yeah, encapsulates the brilliance of Monty Kiffin. And obviously you need players to make the plays as Rondé did. But, and there's a reason why so many teams have tried to copy the Tampa 2. Not all have succeeded. Few have. Because it's not about a system making the players also, but the players have to make the system.
Yeah, and Katz, it's crazy because you're doing your list based on chronological order. I'm doing mine based on rankings, but we had Dungy at 4 together. You had McKay 5, I had Bowles 5, but I'm having Monty Kiffin as my third ranked coach as well in the top 5-1, non-chronological, just my rankings. As you said, he spanned 2 great coaches, and that's rare for a guy to stay around a team, a coordinator to stay around a team. When a great head coach leaves, like Tony Dungy left, Monty Kiffin could have easily been like, I'm fed up here, let me get out of here. Instead, he liked what he built there, continued to build there. Also was a great assistant coach groomer, had some great ones under him, like the Mike Tomlins of the world, the Lovie Smiths of the world. So he was also great in coaching development, great with the players. He's a Ring of Honor guy for Tampa. He was really one of a kind. Tampa 2, as you alluded to, Richard alluded to, so many people try to replicate it, such little success. It's kind of like the tush push, right? All these teams try and do it. Little could do it like the Eagles. That they ran. Yep, Katz telling. Yeah, I agree. Katz is a great storyteller, and that's why the show's great, because Katz is a man, and that's why the great Gio said, hey, I'm tuned in tonight because this guy's like a Bucs encyclopedia. But I got Kiffin at 3rd as well, Katz, and I'm going to go into a little bit of other reasons as well. As you alluded to, finish in the top 10 in points allowed and yards allowed 10 times during his period with the Buccaneers. That's an NFL record. So pretty much every year he was the Bucs DC. And I remember, Katz, the downfall of the Bucs the one year before Gruden got fired. They were 9-3. Yeah. And Monty Kiffin announced he was leaving, departing, and pretty much going to follow his son at that point in time. And next thing you know, the defense was never the same. I don't know what the hell happened that year, but the Bucs ended up losing 4 in a row. And at one point in time, it looked in like a shoo-in for the playoffs at 9-3 when Monty Kiffin ended up not even being a playoff appearance. And then Gruden gets fired, Kiffin leaves. Nothing was ever the same here in Tampa. But that kind of spoke volumes of his importance and impact. It impacted and affected a team that much, where the Bucs ended up going on a 4-game skid, not making the playoffs. I am glad he's in the Ring of Honor, very well deserved, and I'm glad we were able to honor him a couple of times at Raymond James as well, Katz, and he was able to visit before he got sick and whatnot and had to hang it up. But a hell of a guy, hell of a person. Obviously, Lane Kiffin's still doing great things, and it was cool to see him end his career with Lane at FIU and Ole Miss. But so far, I got Bowles at 5, Dungy at 4, Kiffin at 3. Katz says McKay at 5, Dungy at 4, Kiffin at 3 chronologically. Hey, Katz, who's your number 2?
John Gruden. And, you know, an easy one, obviously. Again, he's overlapped. Monty Kiffin overlapped, like I said, with Dungy and Gruden. The Bucs needed somebody to get them over the edge. You know, Tony Dungy did so many great things here. But like I mentioned, finding an offensive coordinator just wasn't one of them. It didn't happen for him. They tried 3 different quarterbacks. Brad Johnson was the last one Dungy had. They needed someone that could bring accountability to the offense because it was told, and this was not meant, you know, to insult his tenure when his players talked about this, but some players mentioned that he did hold the defense to a different standard than the offense. He wanted his offense to just not make mistakes and, you know, let the defense do the heavy lifting. And that was fine. It got the Bucs to where they wanted to be in terms of being a playoff team, very close to getting to a Super Bowl. It wasn't enough to get them to and over the top. And John Gruden brought a different kind of mentality in that I think kind of the players needed. They needed that extra push. The offense, while not spectacular, he brought in some of his own guys. They weren't able to retain Warrick Dunn due to salary cap reasons. That was unfortunate. But they brought in Michael Pittman, who fit very well. They brought in Ken Dilger. They brought in Keenan McCardell, and who could forget Joe Jurevicius as well. They even brought in guys that kind of got forgotten in the wash, maybe. Roman Oben came in. Kerry Jenkins came in, maybe steadily stabilized the offensive line. It wasn't easy that year. It wasn't easy. Kenyatta Walker had to move to right tackle. It was not pretty at times. But before you knew it, Brad Johnson very quietly put together a 22 touchdown, 6 interception season. That's, you know, maybe touchdown to interception ratio. Maybe today people would kind of, you know, go, you know, as people, I kind of hear people do that with Jalen Hurts, actually. Brad did a great job. And as the season went on, that offense started to really click. But the shining moment to me, really, of a couple with Gruden was after a 20-10 loss in Philly, which was Brad Johnson got his ribs broken in that game. I believe it was a tightly contested game. The Bucs' only touchdown was scored by Derek Brooks. Gruden picked up on something, and on the bus afterwards, he said, Sapp, I got him. I've got the answer to that Philly blitz. And basically was saying, we're going to see these guys again, and we're going to beat them. And sure enough, that turned out to be prophetic. In the meantime, before that, you know, some other moments that season stand out, you know, when the Bucs played the Falcons for the second time, everybody talked. It was all about Michael Vick. And Gruden used that as a motivator. It's like, they're disrespecting you. They're talking about Michael Vick. What about this defense? And he challenged that defense, too. He said, I want you guys are so great. All right, I want you to score touchdowns. I want 9 touchdowns. And players are, 9 touchdowns? I mean, that's preposterous. Well, ultimately, Dwight Smith's touchdown in the Super Bowl, his second, was the 9th touchdown that defense scored. His game plan also for the game in Philly was great. The Bucs started off. They were able to put a field goal on their opening drive. And that great play to Joe Jurevicius. He was able to get him matched up with a linebacker on that play. He took it 70 yards. You know, the Bucs were finally in the end zone. They hadn't been in the end zone on offense in Philly for 3 straight games. The 2 games where they were eliminated by Philly the previous 2 years, they scored 3 points, they scored 9. It was all field goals, and they only scored a defensive touchdown. So finally, they got that monkey off their back and scoring that offensive touchdown in Philly. And after that, you know, once they got to the 20-point mark, which was more than enough for that defense, you know, he knew when to kind of get a little bit more conservative and, you know, make sure, you know, not want to put anything in harm's way. He did a great job with that. Obviously, you know, there were a lot of bumps in the road after. In fact, sometimes I think he was a little bit of a victim of what they gave up to get him. 2 firsts and 2 seconds is no joke. Obviously, you don't know who's going to get picked. That's tough. The salary cap was tough on them at that point because they kept pushing money back to keep the team together, which was the right thing to do. I thought 2005, he did a fantastic job. They'd come off of 2 losing seasons with a ton of heartbreaking losses. I don't even want to mention some of them. They were so gut-wrenching. But then that season, all of the tough losses for the regular season went their way, and they won 11 games. And Cadillac Williams, was drafted. He was a great running back for the Bucs that season. He had a couple great years, a career shortened due to injury. Gruden figured out Joey Galloway was traded for Keyshawn. People thought, Joey Galloway, man, what are you doing acquiring this guy? His best days are behind him. He's too soft. Gruden got him working. He even had Chris Sims, Joey Galloway was working. And there wasn't a lot else to defend on that offense. It was pretty much Cadillac and Joey Galloway. And somehow that team won 11 games. Unfortunately, they lost to Washington in the playoffs. It's a tough loss. But it showed that Gruden was able to get the team rebuilt somewhat, get back to playoffs. Obviously, he'd have a tough year in 2006. I'll share at some other point a story he recently told Geronde Barber about his quarterback in 2006. Again, made the playoffs in 2007. Fell short in the playoffs. Tried to get Brett Favre. Maybe things are different if that trade for Brett Favre goes through. Didn't happen. So they had to go back to Jeff Garcia. Ultimately, that season fell short. But ultimately, a very good tenure. I think his post-Super Bowl tenure was always scrutinized, but I also thought he was the victim of some bad circumstances as well in that. So, proud of the work he did here, especially winning the Super Bowl. And at that point, really, it doesn't matter what else you do, because and I'll just finish because I could go on, and I can't go on and on because we're out of time. We only have so much time. But Troy Aikman at the end of that game in Philadelphia, when the Bucs came up 2 firsts, 2 seconds, $8 million to get him. Troy Aikman quickly said, and if that equals a Super Bowl championship, that's one of the best bargains that I've ever seen. And those are very prophetic words by Troy Aikman.
I love John Gruden as well. David says Kiffin pushed for Raheem because he believed in him. That was enough for most people. Yeah, remember the timeline real quick was Lane Kiffin announced he's going to USC. Monty Kiffin and Gruden pretty much had a tiff behind the scene at that point as Kiffin was on his way out, appointed Raheem to be the next DC. But yeah, Kiffin was following his son. It's not like Raheem was being promoted, so Kiffin left. It was the other way around. Kiffin,
and he was the right choice. That was the right choice because Raheem was a very good defensive backs coach. So that was the right choice by Kiffin. And I think Gruden liked Raheem quite a bit as well. So that made sense. It didn't work in the end. Things went a lot haywire for a while, but it was the right.
Great Bucs defense literally started underperforming. But as Katz said, the right thing. And Raheem eventually became head coach and it didn't work. But speaking of what worked, and my number 2 ranked head coach is John Gruden as well for many of the same reasons as what Katz alluded to, but just getting the team over the hump, getting the team over the edge, bringing that grit to the Bay. Nothing against Dungy. You need 2 different types of coaching styles in life, but Gruden was definitely a grip it and rip it type coach. I remember Warren Sapp telling the story, walking around, "Hey, coach, how you doing?" Seeing Gruden. Gruden looked at him, "I'm going to get your fat ass in practice today," he told Warren Sapp. He was a guy who pushed his team to get the most out of them. And yeah, his drafting was what hindered him here, if anything. Sadly, although Cadillac ended up being a pretty good pick, Aaron Rodgers would have been the pick there.
Yeah.
Obviously, easy to say that now, but Scott Reynolds, the Pewter Report, told the story how John Gruden pretty much picked Cadillac based on the name. And that's
interesting because he, as I recall, also part of the story is they went to a private workout for Aaron Rodgers. He brought Jerry Rice to be the wide receiver. And it seemed, from what I understood, and Scott's probably right, is for whatever reason, they told Aaron Rodgers they were going to pick him. I think he got cold feet for what reason, I'm not sure. He might not have wanted another young quarterback because he had Chris Sims, he had Brian Greasy, he had kind of he kind of preferred veteran quarterbacks. Maybe that's why. But he's admitted, I should have picked Aaron Rodgers. We were going to do it. We never will really know, I don't think, why they got cold feet at the last second in picking Aaron Rodgers. Things certainly could have been different with him. It could have been different had the Brett Favre trade gone through. The story was that was actually on Green Bay. They didn't want to trade him in the conference because they were playing us that year. They preferred to trade him out of the NFC, and therefore he ended up with the Jets. And, the rest is history.
Yeah, Warren Sapp, more to that story, was like, for as Katz alluded to, we did give up a lot. Sapp was like, man, for as much as we gave up, I'm thinking this guy's going to be a giant or something, King Kong, come with a couple planes, come with all this money. I look at him, he looks like Chucky. I'm like, this is classic, but he got that team playing. He got that team playing and got him over the Eagles hump as well. And he stayed competitive, even maybe while he decimated the roster a bit, sure, but he still had him competitive. And I think his biggest hindrance was, yes, the Rodgers pick, but he overcame, ended up having the year in Cadillac Williams, ended up having a couple playoff berths, got the most out of wide receiver Michael Clayton. So did definitely have his ups. And
for 1 year, they got something out of Michael Clayton. I don't know what happened after that. One good year. He got a lot out of Ike Hilliard, though, who was recently fired by Raheem Morris. Well, that's another story, but it is funny how things come full circle, isn't it? He played for John Gruden. He was here when Raheem Morris was a coach. He then gets a coaching job with him. He gets fired by him. It just popped into my mind, the symmetry of all that.
Is that why you're bringing up Raheem? Is that your number one spot where we're at?
Raheem does miss the mark, but Bruce Arians doesn't. Bruce Arians, 2019, at this point, we're deep into the abyss. We've gone through Raheem. We've gone through Greg Schiano. We've gone through Lovey. We've gone through Dirk. And I'm not trying to disparage any of these guys doing the best they could do. Yeah, okay. Yeah, they did the best they could do.
Mike Smith, I know it was defensive coordinator, but remember the Mike Smith days? My Lord.
They had that one good year in 2016, and we thought they went 9-7. And then before you knew it, that year totally went to their heads, and they never came close to replicating that. They needed credibility. It was almost like we come full circle back to the way it was when Tony Dungy was hired. They needed that credibility again. Somebody that could change the culture, bring the culture back. Because it was, and they thought Lovie Smith was going to be that guy because he coached here before and Dungy did such a great job. Total opposite happened. Those 2 years were just a shit show, to say the least. Bruce Arians comes in immediately. You can see there's accountability. He gets rid of Vernon Hargraves. So it wasn't just a bunch of bloviating. When Vernon Hargraves was clearly, he wasn't the guy. He wasn't hustling. He wasn't, sticking his nose in there. And Bruce Arians got him out of there. And I think that was one of the moves that really showed, all right, this guy's not fooling around. His first season, unfortunately, missed the playoffs. They did go 7-9. They lost 10 or more games so many years. They were very competitive that year. Unfortunately, it was a tough, for Jameis. It was fun. It was not fun, and we barely made it through 16 games. But I think also, though, you still could see that the players believed in Bruce a lot more than they had the previous 4 or however many coaches. You could see there was a belief there. No, they didn't make the playoffs, but there was credibility. And then I thought, and I'm not going to, Jameis he's a great guy. All right, Jameis is a great guy. And I expected him to be brought back. And the reason I expected him to be brought back was I thought, well, we're the Bucs, and unfortunately, we just can't do any better right now. That's the best option. But Bruce Arians had other ideas, and Levante David told the story of how he called him up and said, hey, Levante, the GOAT may be coming here. And I don't think Levante was talking about this. I don't remember if he was on with Kay Adams, who he was telling the story to. And he didn't believe him. He kind of thought, no, there's no way. And Levante was thinking of leaving at that point. He was talking about how he was tired of losing, having all these great seasons wasted. He's kind of, getting up. He's already in, 7th, 8th season. He's close to 30. Who could blame him? Well, then, Bruce Arians, with a lot of help from Jason Light, of course, and Mike Greenberg and John Spytek, they go and get Tom Brady in here. And clearly, everybody buys in.
Door number 2.
Right, door number 2. Bruce Arians was, they might have butted heads. They did butt heads a few times, but the ultimate goal was the same. They both wanted to win badly, very badly. And, and I can tell you basically, if Dirk Cutter's the head coach, if Lovie Smith's the head coach, Greg Schiano's the head coach, Tom Brady ain't coming here. He would have been somewhere else. So he got him in there, and then Bruce Arians did, like I said, with the culture. And some of the things I loved about him, and the way he talks about how he would say, listen, if you're staying here and you're working all the time, and you're not going home and seeing your family, you're not having dinner with the family, you're not spending time with your kids, I'm firing you. That was one of his mantras. And you gotta love that in in a world with people just can't seem to leave, sometimes can't leave the office. They're always working. They're married to the job. Bruce Arians knew about work-life balance. He knew about how even in the NFL, because sometimes it seems like these guys are superhuman. No, they're people too, just like us. They've got their kids, they've got their families, to tend to. And he wanted to make sure that they weren't just, using up, basically spending their whole life at their job. He wanted to make sure that they were taking care of their kids, being with their families. And I fully admire that, because that's something maybe other coaches have that strong feeling. I don't know. You never really hear any of them publicly say that. And that made Bruce really one of a kind to me, a unique guy in his own way, very unique and very, uncommon, especially these days.
Yeah, newsflash, we are going to save our executives and honorable mentions for another show, as we are getting into great detail on this coach list, which is great. And Richard will maybe dive deeper into maybe assistant coaches next time, strictly, or something, and maybe a Bisaccia or Tomlin will come in, or maybe we'll expand our top 5 list to a top 10. J-Lo said, well said, Katz. I love it. And ironically enough, although mine's in ranking order and Katz is in chronological order, we have the same top 4 as I had Dungy, Katz had Dungy, I had Kiffin, Katz had Kiffin, I had Gruden, Katz had Gruden. Now I got BA, Katz had BA. My 5 was Bowles, Katz 5 was McKay. But I put Bruce as number 1. Great guy on and off the field, overcame a lot in life, waited forever to get his turn as a head coach, finally came around in Arizona. Things didn't go great there. Well, they started great, and then how all things end, a little sour. Went into the booth a year, came out of retirement. Fun fact, had a trade for both of our Super Bowl head coaches. Had a trade for Bruce Arians as well from the Arizona Cardinals, so got Bruce out of retirement, traded a pick for him, a lot cheaper of a deal than the Gruden one, but he was nothing but a blessing. Guys like Ndamukong Suh would never sign here back in the day. And shout out to Jason Light as well for being able to give the capacity to recruit a guy like Bruce Arians, who was a great coach with Indy, great coach with Arizona, obviously great assistant coach all over the place. Came here, I met him multiple times at his Arians Family Foundation golf event in Indianapolis with my fiance Olivia. Nicest guy, opens up like a book, tells you his world, asks about your world, coaches his ass off, gets great assistants in place, now gives the reins to Todd Bowles, who didn't miss a beat, spent some time in the front office, still had that fiery opinion on the sideline, went at it with the Saints, brought this team a Super Bowl, very hard to do, out of the COVID year, even with a guy like Tom Brady, who many people said he was washed. Bruce Arians probably had 2 of the best 3 coaching seasons here in Buccaneers history, 2020 and 2021, as Tom Brady should have won the MVP. And if we didn't get banged up, Antonio Brown doesn't melt down, I truly think we go back to back. But he got great things out of every draft pick possible. Jamel Dean, Carlton Davis, all of those guys just really exceeded under Coach Arians. Also got Ndamukong Suh here, Brady here, helped get Gronk, helped lure in guys like Lenny F. And remember, he sat down Lenny F. and said, it's either you get in or get out. And that really was a great thing he did for the Super Bowl run. And Katz, you mentioned a lot of great things as well, Katz, but I love the Bruce Arians choice at number 1. And again, it's really hard to rank out of these guys, but him bringing that Super Bowl to Tampa, and Katz sustained success now in Tampa is part in Bruce Arians. And like I said, I'm part of the minority here probably, but I do believe that Bruce, out of the good graces of his heart, handed down the reins to Todd Bowles. He set up his staff, so he said, hey, I'm going to have a minority head coach one day, follow my footsteps, and he did just that with Todd Bowles, gave him a great opportunity, gave him a better pathway than he had with the Jets, and now look at Todd Bowles, the most division titles for a head coach in Buccaneers history. So,
and I've got to add, I can't be, I would be remiss not to. Todd Bowles is I want him in the top 5, but there's only 5 spots, and I went chronologically.
And I think that's how I am with McKay, so,
Yeah, 5B, because his story, here's the thing on Todd Bowles, something, and I'll fall on this. I'll hedge with this. His story hasn't been fully written yet. We're only, Todd Bowles might be old, but older as far as head coaches go. I think he's 63. How much longer he wants to do this, I don't know. But what I will say, I want to say some good things about this man because, first of all, he's not well. I feel like he's not very popular amongst Bucs fans, despite what he's done and did with the salary cap issues as well, and hiring guys like Dave Canales and Liam Cohen and saying, I want Baker Mayfield to be my quarterback, rather than settling on a guy like Kyle Trask, for example, or someone else. He said, I know that I want him as my quarterback. He brought him in, and now he's evolved. He's got a time management coach in here. And, that's what I respect about him. Some people think, oh, he's stubborn, he's old, he's only going to do things his way. Well, 3 years ago, Todd Bowles doesn't go for it down 7-0 on his own 38 with a 4th and 1, like he did in the first game in Atlanta. All right. Todd Bowles a few years ago doesn't say, you know what, the best opportunity to win is if we let the guy score and get the ball back to our offense. He doesn't manage the clock that well in previous years. He acknowledges, I've had a hard time. I'm going out and I'm getting someone to help with this. And that's very admirable because you look around the league, the coaches that succeed are the ones that are willing to change. And there's, for everyone that is, I feel like there's 3 or 4 that are, it's like, nope, my way or the highway. And those coaches usually don't last and end up being assistants again.
And that's true. They usually get washed through, and that's part of their reason why they get faded out is because they're not willing to adapt. Todd Bowles was. And my honorable mention was head coach John McKay as well. Style, fashionable, awesome stuff there. But there you have it, Katz and I with the same list. His number 5 is McKay. My number 5 is Bowles. My number 4 is Dungy. His number 4 is Dungy. My number 3 is Kiffin. His number 3 is Kiffin. My number 2 is Gruden. His number 2 is Gruden. My 1 is BA. His 1 is BA. Honorable mention McKay for me, Bowles for him. Well, Richard, let's not forget that's the Bruce Arians frame of mind. So he learned from Bruce in his time with Arizona, in his time with Tampa. Bruce, Larry Foote, all the guys under Bruce always had the same mentality. The guys who get paid play. And Bruce is always a stubborn type of mentality when he was in there as well. Not a bad thing, but it's loyal to a fault sometimes, right? And, nothing against those old school coaches, Katz, but that's just how you see it with Bowles and BA. And one thing that Bowles does great, Katz, he handles the media so well.
Oh, yeah.
He gets asked all these goofy questions and, all this. I'm not going to mention names, always a lot of jibber jabber, but he has really done a number with the media. And as J-Lo alluded to, he's really gotten better each year as we are.
He's funny, too. He's a funny guy. Even today, he's like, what did he say? He's like, do you think you're beloved in Philly? He said, only at Ishkabibbles. I'm like, what the heck is he talking? I looked it up. That's actually a restaurant in Philly. He's a funny guy behind the scenes, but he keeps a poker face, and he's serious, but he's funny when he needs to be, and his players really play hard for him. And like J-Lo said, he has gotten better each year because he's willing to, self-scout, so to speak, and look back on some mistakes and correct them. No, it's not going to be perfect. No coach is perfect, but he's done that, and that's why I'm very thankful that he is our coach now and in the future, hopefully.
I agree, and I hope he continues to be the coach for years and years to come. I'm a big Todd Bowles guy, and I don't buy into the BA Brady beef. I don't think there was anything there. I think Brady would have had Arians not only off the sideline, out of the organization. Let's not forget, Brady was playing like an MVP under Arians, so sometimes not everything is what you hear, is what you see. A dive into the 813 Tampa Bay Sports History with A-Cats and Tampa Tones as we wrap up our first episode ever where we took a deep dive into our top-ranked coaches of Buccaneers history. You've had a lot of player lists out there this offseason for the 50th anniversary, not really coaches. So today we gave love to the coaches, Mr. A-Cats, and next time we do this, we'll get more so into executives and assistants. I think it was a lot of fun. What are your final words for everybody watching on YouTube? By the way, if you are, hit that like button, subscribe button, and turn that notification bell on. And remember, Thursday, we'll be back with Toe in the Line and Campus Kickoff for NFL and college football quickie shows to get you ready for sports weekend. But Katz, final words for the program, brother? Total fun today.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for listening or watching. If you were, I hope, if you remember a lot of these things, it took you down memory lane. If these are things you didn't remember, I hope you'll remember them now and that you're happy that you learned about it as well, because, not everything, it's 50 years. A lot's happened in 50 years. There's been, there's a lot of ugly in there, but there have been a lot of great memories, and these coaches have been at the forefront of it. So, again, thanks for everyone for listening. I really hope you enjoyed it.
I agree. And J-Lo says the fact players play hard for him makes me believe in him. And I want to end with this. Yeah! The Todd Bowles when he gets excited.
It's exciting! I'm excited!
And the Baker, I'm excited too. Those guys are awesome. Speaking of awesome, let's beat the Eagles this weekend. 1 o'clock Sunday. We'll be previewing that game Saturday on our Saturday Showdown Weekend of Football kickoff show. 9:05 a.m. Eastern, 8:05 a.m. Central. And like I said, Towing the Line campus kickoff coming as well. Our guy Richard was really great tonight in the chat. We appreciate
you, Richard.
J-Lo was in the house. Everybody else who joined as well, Olivia, Buckin, everybody else in between, David B, and so many more great people. Facebook, you had Al Manito, David Farrar, and the rest of the crew. We always leave you with this. Fire the damn cannons and go Bucs, Cats. It's been a lot of fun. We'll see you next month on a dive into the 813 Tampa Sports History, my friend.
Absolutely awesome, my friend, and go Bucs as always.
Can't wait. Go Bucs. Let's get a win Sunday, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Take care, Tons.
You too. Bro, we'll put it like that.
Nice.
What's it like? I was actually there in attendance in Cleveland for Coe's first career NFL touchdown, which was awesome. And,
Awesome.
it was a great game. You could hear me on camera. I was just screaming, "Say it ain't so, Coe! Say it ain't so!" Sadly,
Yes.
from there,
Yeah.
the game kind of went off the rails a little. That was the last high moment of that game, but it was a great game. Overtime loss, fun time.
Yeah.
But how was that moment for you? Seeing the first, whether it was on TV, in person, wherever you were, seeing his first NFL touchdown. How was that?
Well, dude, I mean, we were at home because it was a away game. We don't travel to a lot of the away games because we can get into that later. But to watch that and to think I wished I was there live. So to have your video was so cool. And just say, this is so cool. I mean, that was so cool for us. Catching it from Tom Brady, right? Like he's got the ball yet. First NFL touchdown means a lot, right? I mean, as a dad, that's just so cool to see. And it was fun to watch. And, it didn't have the outcome we wanted, but still the same. What a memory! What a memory to have, right? So,
and honestly,
cool.
those. One of the best guests ever, the Buccateers in the house tonight. You guys hear him on Tampa radio all the time. He's one of the best in the business. My favorite personal in the business. That's why I'm elated tonight. Growing up in the Chicago area, you're used to sports radio. That's what gets me through the day. So this man does help get me through the day, I will say, with the Pat and Aaron show at work. Nothing like it. So it's incredible. It looks like we got Stunna bumbling in. I'm Tampa Tones. We are joined by lead goon tonight, host of the Pat and Aaron show of WDAE, Pat Donovan. And it sounds like Stunna is bumbling a little bit. Going to put him on mute for a second until that gets a little cleared. But we're joined by Pat
It looks like
Donovan.
Stunna's hanging out with Cheech and Chong in a car with the windows up or something over there.
It does look like he got a little.
No, my camera's broke.
And he was trying to pull me in big time. And then I was like, hey, nothing's happened with Indianapolis yet. Like, I really want to give Indy